The rain hit like gravel against the garage door. Ethan Hayes stood frozen, staring at the name scrawled on the repair order in his hand. Clara Whitmore. A name he hadn't spoken in 18 years. A name that used to mean everything. His chest tightened as headlights swept through the window, and when the door opened, she stepped inside. Soaked. Shaking. Still her. The wrench slipped from his fingers and clattered against the concrete. This wasn't coincidence. This was the past coming to collect what he'd buried. If you want to see how far a single name can unravel a man's carefully rebuilt life, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The storm had been building all afternoon, thick clouds rolling in low over the valley like they had something to say. Ethan Hayes barely noticed. He'd been elbow deep in the engine of a '98 Chevy for the better part of 3 hours, fighting with a seized alternator bolt that refused to give. His hands were black with grease, his knuckles scraped raw, and his back was starting to remind him he wasn't 25 anymore. "Dad, you coming home soon?" Lily's voice crackled through the cheap speaker of his phone, propped up on the workbench between a half-empty coffee mug and a pile of invoices he'd been avoiding for a week. "Soon, kiddo," Ethan said, not looking up. "Got one more job to finish." "You said that an hour ago." "This time I mean it. You said that too." He smiled despite himself. 13 years old and she already had his number. Smart kid, too smart sometimes. She had her mother's eyes, that same way of looking at him that said she could see right through whatever excuse he was cooking up. "I'll bring pizza, the good kind. The good kind is the kind you don't burn in the oven." "Fair point." "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, Lil." The line went dead and the garage felt quieter than it should have. Ethan straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that was already filthy, and glanced at the clock mounted above the door. Nearly 7. The Chevy could wait until tomorrow. He was about to kill the overhead lights when the phone on the wall rang. The landline he kept for the business. The one that barely rang anymore. Most people just called his cell now. Or didn't call at all. Hayes Auto Repair wasn't exactly thriving. It was surviving, which was different. The big chain shops over in Riverside had taken most of his business over the past 5 years. But Ethan kept the doors open because it was what he knew how to do, and because giving up felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. He picked up on the third ring. "Hayes Auto Repair." "Hi, The voice on the other end was soft, strained, female. "I'm sorry to call so late. My car broke down about 2 miles out on Route 9, and honestly, I don't know what to do. I tried calling a tow service, but they said it'd be hours before they could get to me." Ethan sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He should have said no. Should have told her to wait for the tow truck like everyone else. But something in her voice, something unsteady, almost afraid, made him pause. "What kind of car?" "Honda Accord, 2015, I think. It just died. No warning. I pulled over and now it won't start." "All right. Sit tight. I'll be there in 10. "Thank you. Really. Thank you." She hung up before he could ask her name. Ethan grabbed his jacket and keys, locked up the garage, and climbed into his truck, a beat-up Ford Ranger that had seen better days but still ran like a dream because he'd rebuilt half of it himself. The paint was faded, the passenger door didn't lock right, and the radio only worked when it felt like it, but the engine purred. That was what mattered. The rain started as he pulled onto the main road, light at first, then heavier, drumming against the windshield in a steady, relentless rhythm. Route 9 was mostly empty this time of night, a 2-lane stretch of asphalt that cut through farmland and forest, connecting the town to the highway 15 miles south. Ethan's headlights swept over the wet pavement, catching the reflective paint of the center line, the dark shapes of trees pressing in from both sides. He'd driven this road 1,000 times. Maybe more. When he was younger, he used to race down it late at night with the windows down and the radio cranked up, thinking he was invincible. Thinking the whole world was ahead of him and nothing bad could ever really happen. That was a long time ago. He almost missed her. The Accord was pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour. Ethan slowed, eased his truck in behind it, and killed the engine. He sat there for a second, watching the rain batter the windshield, then pulled his hood up and stepped out into the storm. She was standing beside the car, arms wrapped around herself, soaked through. Her hair was plastered to her face, her jacket clinging to her shoulders like it had given up trying to keep her dry. She looked up when she heard his boots on the gravel, and even through the rain, even in the dark, Ethan saw her face. His breath caught. No, it couldn't be. Clara. She blinked, wiping rain from her eyes, and for a moment she just stared at him like she couldn't quite place him. Then recognition hit, and her expression shifted. Surprise, confusion, something else he couldn't name. Ethan? Her voice was the same. Softer than he remembered, maybe. Older, but still hers. He stood there, frozen, water streaming off his hood, his mind scrambling to make sense of what he was seeing. Clara Whitmore. The girl he'd loved when he was 23 and stupid and thought love was enough to fix anything. The girl who'd left town 18 years ago and never looked back. The girl he'd spent years trying to forget. What are you... He stopped, shook his head. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. She tried to smile, but it didn't quite land. You're the mechanic? Yeah. Small world. Too small. The words came out sharper than he'd intended, and he saw her flinch. He looked away, focusing on the car instead. Safer that way. Pop the hood. She hesitated, then nodded and reached inside, pulling the lever. Ethan moved to the front of the car, lifting the hood and propping it open. He pulled a flashlight from his jacket pocket and leaned in, scanning the engine. Everything looked intact. No obvious leaks, no loose belts. He checked the battery terminals, tight and clean. He straightened, frowning. Try starting it. Clara climbed into the driver's seat, and a second later the engine turned over. Once, twice. Nothing. Just a weak clicking sound that told him everything he needed to know. Battery's dead, he called over the rain. Or the alternator's shot. Either way, you're not driving this tonight. She stepped out, closing the door behind her. Can you tow it? Yeah, back to the garage. I'll take a proper look in the morning. Okay, thank you. She looked at him, and for the first time since he'd arrived, their eyes met. Really met. And in that moment, Ethan felt something crack open inside him, something he'd spent years sealing shut. Get in the truck, he said, turning away. You're soaking. He hooked the Accord up to the tow hitch, working quickly despite the rain, his hands moving on autopilot while his mind churned. Clara Whitmore, here. After all this time, it didn't make sense. None of it made sense. When he was 23, he'd been ready to marry her, had the ring picked out, and everything. Then she'd gotten an offer for a job in Chicago, something with a marketing firm. He couldn't remember the details anymore, and she'd left. Just like that. Told him long distance wouldn't work, that they wanted different things, that it was better to end it clean. He'd been angry for a long time after that, then just sad, then nothing, or so he'd thought. When he finished hooking up the car, he climbed into the truck and found her already inside, shivering in the passenger seat. She'd pulled her jacket tighter around herself, but it wasn't doing much good. Ethan cranked the heat and pulled back onto the road, the Accord trailing behind them like a ghost. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The wipers scraped back and forth across the windshield. The heater rattled softly. Clara stared out the window, her breath fogging the glass. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. How long have you been back? 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I didn't know you were still here. Where else would I be? She didn't answer. Why'd you come back? He asked. Clara was quiet for a moment, then said, My mom's sick. Lung cancer. Stage 4. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Another silence. Heavier this time. He wanted to ask her 100 things, where she'd been all these years, what her life had looked like, if she'd thought about him at all. But he didn't, because part of him didn't want to know. You married? He asked, not sure why he was asking, not sure he wanted to know. Divorced 2 years ago. Kids? No. He nodded, didn't say anything else. What about you? Clara asked softly. Widowed, 6 years. Ethan, I don't. He kept his eyes on the road. It was a long time ago. It wasn't, though. 6 years felt like yesterday some days. Other days it felt like a lifetime. Sarah had been good to him, patient, kind. She'd known he'd loved someone before her, and she'd never pushed him about it. They'd built something solid together, not fireworks maybe, but real. And when she'd gotten sick, aggressive breast cancer that took her in less than a year, Ethan had learned what it meant to lose someone all over again. "I have a daughter," he said. "Lily. She's 13. Clara turned to look at him, and he could feel her eyes on the side of his face. "That's good. I'm glad." "Yeah." They reached the garage 15 minutes later. Ethan backed the Accord into one of the bays, unhooked it, and closed the overhead door. Clara stood near the entrance, dripping onto the concrete, looking small and out of place. "I'll call you tomorrow once I figure out what's wrong," Ethan said, grabbing a clipboard from the workbench. "Need your number." She rattled it off, and he wrote it down, careful not to meet her eyes. When he finished, he set the clipboard aside and pulled his keys from his pocket. "I'll give you a ride. Where are you staying?" "My mom's place, out on Maple Street." He knew the house. Everyone in town knew the house. The Whitmores had lived there for 40 years. Big white colonial with the wraparound porch and the oak tree in the front yard. Clara used to sit under that tree and read when she was in high school. He'd kissed her under that tree once, late one summer night when they were both 19 and thought they had all the time in the world. The drive took less than 10 minutes. Clara didn't say much, and Ethan didn't push. When they pulled into the driveway, she turned to him, her hand on the door handle. "Thank you for coming out in the rain, for all of it. It's my job." Still. She opened the door, then paused. "Ethan? Yeah? It's good to see you." He didn't respond, couldn't. Clara stepped out into the rain and hurried toward the house, disappearing through the front door without looking back. Ethan sat there for a long time, engine idling, staring at the dark windows. Then he put the truck in reverse and drove home. Lily was asleep on the couch when he walked in, the TV flickering softly in the corner. He turned it off, draped a blanket over her, and went to the kitchen. He stood at the sink, staring out the window at nothing, his hands still smelling like grease and rain. Clara Whitmore. Of all the people in the world, of all the nights. He didn't sleep much. The next morning, Ethan was back in the garage by 6, running diagnostics on the Accord. The alternator was shot, just like he'd thought. An easy fix. He had a replacement in stock, and it took him less than 2 hours to swap it out and test the system. By 8:30, the car was running smooth. He should have called her right then. Should have told her it was ready and left it at that. Instead, he stalled. He swept the floor, organized his tools, checked the oil on 3 other vehicles that didn't need it, reordered parts he wouldn't need for another month. Around 10, Lily showed up, backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds dangling around her neck. "You forgot to wake me up," she said, leaning against the doorway. "You looked comfortable." "I had a test today, Dad." "Did you miss it?" "No, but I was late." "Did you pass?" She rolled her eyes. "Probably." Ethan smiled. Lily had her mother's sharp wit and his stubbornness. Dangerous combination. She was tall for her age, all gangly limbs and attitude. With dark hair she refused to brush properly and a perpetual expression that said she was 3 steps ahead of whatever conversation you thought you were having. "There's leftover pizza in the fridge," he said. "For breakfast?" "It's brain food. It's cardboard. Then don't eat it." She grinned and disappeared back toward the house, which was really just 100 yards behind the garage. They lived in what used to be a foreman's cottage on the edge of an old industrial lot. Small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit a table. But it was theirs, and Ethan had fixed it up enough that it felt like home. He watched her go, then turned back to the Accord. He couldn't put it off any longer. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number Clara had given him. She answered on the second ring. "Hello? It's Ethan. Your car's ready." "Already?" "Alternator was dead. Swapped it out. You're good to go." "That was fast. Thank you." "No problem. You can pick it up whenever." There was a pause, then, "Are you there now?" "Yeah." "I'll come by in an hour." She hung up before he could respond. Ethan set the phone down and exhaled slowly. An hour. He had an hour to figure out how to act like this didn't matter. Like seeing her again didn't feel like reopening a wound that had never quite healed. He didn't figure it out. When Clara arrived, she looked different than she had the night before. Dry, for one thing. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a dark sweater that made her look older. More tired. But still her. Same curve to her mouth when she almost smiled. Same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. "Hey," she said, stepping into the garage. "Hey." "So, alternator, yeah, should be fine now. Probably last you another 100,000 miles if you keep up with the maintenance." "What do I owe you?" Ethan handed her the invoice. She glanced at it, then looked up at him, frowning. "This seems low. Parts and labor, that's what it costs." "Ethan, take it or leave it." She looked at him for a long moment, then pulled out her wallet and handed him her card. He ran it through the reader, printed the receipt, and handed it back. Their fingers brushed just for a second, and Ethan pulled his hand away like he'd been burned. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "You already said that." "I mean it." He nodded. "How's your mom?" Clara's face shifted, something fragile crossing her expression before she locked it down. "Not great. Hospice comes by 3 times a week now. They say it could be a few months, or a few weeks. There's no way to know." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, everyone is." The bitterness in her voice was faint, but it was there. "It's funny. I spent so many years avoiding this place. Told myself I'd never come back, and now I'm here and it's like nothing changed. The same streets, the same people. Even the grocery store still smells like bleach and old produce." Ethan almost smiled. "Some things don't change. Some things do." She was looking at him when she said it, and he knew she wasn't talking about the grocery store. "Keys are in the ignition," he said, nodding toward the car. Clara didn't move. She stood there, hands shoved into her pockets, looking at him like she wanted to say something but couldn't quite figure out how. "What?" Ethan asked. "Nothing. She stopped, shook her head. "It's weird, you know? Being back, seeing you, all of it." "Yeah, it is. I didn't think I'd ever come back here." "Why did you?" "Because she's dying." Clara's voice cracked just slightly. "And I couldn't stay away. No matter how much I wanted to. No matter how much easier it would have been to just let her go without me. I couldn't do it. I tried. But I couldn't." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. Clara took a breath, steadying herself. "Anyway, thanks again for everything." She turned and walked toward the car. Ethan watched her go, something heavy settling in his chest. She paused at the driver's door, looking back at him. "Ethan? Yeah? If you ever want to grab coffee or something, I don't know, just to talk. I'm around." He should have said no, should have told her that door was closed and it wasn't opening again. That 18 years was a long time and people moved on, and there was no point dragging up the past. Instead, he said, "Maybe." Clara smiled, small, sad, real. Then she got in the car and drove away. Ethan stood in the empty garage, hands in his pockets, staring at the space where her car had been. Maybe. What the hell was he thinking? That night, Lily asked him if something was wrong. "No," he lied, pushing spaghetti around his plate without eating it. "You're doing that thing where you stare at your food and forget to eat it." "I'm thinking." "About what?" "Work stuff." "Dad?" He looked at her. Lily was watching him with that sharp, knowing expression she got sometimes. Too smart for her own good. Too much like her mother. Sarah used to do the same thing, corner him with a look that said she already knew what he was thinking and he might as well just say it. "There's a woman," he said slowly. "Someone I used to know. A long time ago." Lily's eyebrows went up. "A woman?" "Don't make it weird." "I'm not making it weird. You're making it weird. She's back in town. Her car broke down and I fixed it, that's all." "And?" "And nothing." "Dad, you're a terrible liar." Ethan sighed. "She asked if I wanted to get coffee. And you said..." "Maybe," Lily grinned. "That's basically a yes." "It's not." "It totally is. Drop it, Lil." She laughed and went back to her phone, but Ethan could see the grin still tugging at the corners of her mouth. He wanted to tell her it wasn't what she thought, that it was just coffee, that Clara was just someone from his past, and it didn't mean anything. But he wasn't sure he believed that himself. He didn't sleep well that night either, or the next. His mind kept circling back to the same place. Clara standing in the rain, looking at him like no time had passed at all. Clara in the garage, hands in her pockets, asking if he wanted coffee. Clara's voice on the phone, soft and strained, thanking him for something that didn't deserve thanks. On the third day he called her. "Hello? It's Ethan." A pause. Then, "Hi. Coffee. If the offer's still on the table." "It is. Tomorrow? Around 2? "Yeah, that works. There's a place on Main Street, the cafe with the red awning." "I remember it." "Okay. Okay." He hung up and immediately wondered if he'd made a mistake. But it was too late now. The damage, or whatever this was already done. The next day dragged. Ethan tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting. He changed the oil on a Toyota, replaced brake pads on a Subaru, fixed a leaking radiator hose. All of it felt automatic, his hands doing the work while his brain was somewhere else entirely. At 1:30, he closed up the garage, went home, and changed his shirt. Lily caught him checking his reflection in the bathroom mirror and smirked. "You look fine, Dad." "I'm not." "You're definitely doing something. You never tuck your shirt in." "It's coffee. With a woman you used to know." "It's not a date." "Sure it's not." He glared at her, but she just laughed and went back to her room. Ethan grabbed his keys and headed out, his stomach doing something uncomfortable that he refused to acknowledge as nerves. The cafe was exactly where he remembered it. Small, cozy. The kind of place that smelled like fresh bread and roasted coffee beans. When he walked in, Clara was already there, sitting at a corner table near the window. She looked up when the door chimed and their eyes met. She waved. He nodded, walked over. "Hey," she said. "Hey. You want anything? I can grab it." "I got it." He ordered a black coffee at the counter, paid, and carried it back to the table. Clara had something that looked complicated. Foam art on top, some kind of flavored syrup swirled in. He sat down across from her, wrapping his hands around the mug. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Clara laughed softly. "This is awkward." "Yeah. I don't know why I thought it wouldn't be. Because we used to be able to talk about anything? That was a long time ago. Doesn't mean it didn't happen." She looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. "No, I guess it doesn't." Ethan took a sip of his coffee. Too hot. He set it down. "So, Chicago. How was it?" "Good. For a while. Then not so good." "What happened?" Clara shrugged. "Life, I guess. I got married. Thought I was doing the right thing. Turns out I wasn't." "What went wrong?" "Everything. Nothing. He wasn't a bad guy. We just didn't fit. I spent 10 years trying to make it work, and one day I woke up and realized I was exhausted. So I left." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Ethan nodded slowly. "That must have been hard." "It was easier than staying." They fell quiet again. Outside, people walked past the window. Couples, families, kids on bikes. The world kept moving, oblivious. "What about you?" Clara asked. "Your wife, what was she like?" "Sarah?" Ethan's chest tightened the way it always did when he said her name. "She was kind, patient, good with Lily, better than I deserved, probably." "Don't say that." "It's true." "Ethan." "She knew," he said quietly, "about you. I never told her, but she knew, and she never asked. Just let it be." Clara's face fell. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She was happy. We were happy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. He paused. When she got sick, it happened fast. One day she was fine, the next she wasn't. By the time they caught it, it was already too late. How old was Lily? 7. That's so young. Yeah. Ethan stared into his coffee. She doesn't remember her mom as well as she should, and I don't know how to fix that. Clara reached across the table, her hand hovering near his for a moment before she pulled it back. You're doing the best you can. That's all anyone can do. Sometimes it doesn't feel like enough. It never does. They sat there, the silence between them less awkward now, more familiar, like slipping into an old jacket that still fit, even after all these years. Why'd you really come back? Ethan asked. And don't say it's just your mom. Clara was quiet for a long time. Then she said, because I ran out of places to run to. I spent 18 years trying to build a life somewhere else, and none of it stuck. And I kept thinking, maybe if I came back here, I'd figure out what I was running from in the first place. Did you? I don't know yet. Ethan nodded. He understood that, more than he wanted to admit. They talked for another hour. About small things mostly. The town, people they used to know, places that had changed and places that hadn't. It was easy, in a way that surprised him. Like no time had passed at all. Like they were 23 again, sitting at this same table, planning a future that never happened. When they finally left, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. Clara walked him to his truck, hands shoved in her pockets. Thanks for coming, she said. Yeah, it was good. We should do it again. Ethan hesitated, then, yeah, maybe we should. She smiled, a real smile this time. And for just a second, Ethan forgot why he'd ever let her go. He drove home with the windows down, the cool air clearing his head. When he walked into the house, Lily was waiting, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. So? So what? How was your not date? Ethan tossed his keys on the counter. It was fine. Just fine? It was good. We talked. And? And nothing, Lil. We're just talking. Lily grinned. Sure, Dad, whatever you say. He shook his head and went to the kitchen, but he couldn't stop the small smile tugging at his lips. Maybe this wasn't a mistake after all. Coffee became a habit. Not every day. But twice a week, sometimes 3, Ethan found himself at that same cafe with Clara, talking about everything and nothing. They fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural, like picking up a conversation that had been paused mid-sentence 18 years ago. At first, they stuck to safe topics, the weather, the town, people they used to know. But slowly, carefully, they started peeling back layers. Clara told him about her marriage, how it had felt like playing a role she'd never auditioned for, how she'd spent a decade trying to be the person her husband wanted instead of figuring out who she actually was. Ethan told her about Sarah, about the guilt he still carried for not loving her the way she'd deserved, even though she'd never asked for more than he could give. You can't blame yourself for that, Clara said one afternoon, stirring sugar into her coffee. Love isn't something you force. I know. Doesn't make it easier. No, I guess it doesn't. They were sitting in their usual spot by the window. Outside, autumn had started creeping in, painting the trees in shades of rust and gold. Ethan watched a leaf spiral down from a branch, landing on the sidewalk where someone's boot crushed it a second later. Do you ever wonder what would have happened? Clara asked quietly. If I hadn't left? Ethan didn't look at her. All the time. Me too. Would it have worked? I don't know, maybe not. She paused. We were so young, Ethan. I don't think either of us knew what we actually wanted. I knew, he said. I wanted you. The words came out before he could stop them, raw and unfiltered. Claire's breath hitched, and when he finally looked at her, he saw something in her eyes that made his chest ache. I wanted you too, she whispered. But I was scared. Of what? Of staying, of being stuck, of turning into my mother, someone who spent her whole life in the same town, married to the same man, doing the same things over and over until she couldn't remember what she'd wanted in the first place. Clara's voice cracked. And now I'm here, taking care of her, and I can't stop thinking that maybe she had it right all along. Maybe staying isn't the same as being stuck. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. You're not stuck, he said. You came back because you chose to. That's different. Is it? Yeah, it is. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, neither of them saying anything. When Clara finally pulled away, her fingers lingered against his for just a second longer than necessary. I should get back, she said softly. Hospice is coming by at 4. How's your mom doing? She's hanging on, barely. The nurses say it won't be long now. Clara stood, slinging her purse over her shoulder. Thanks for this. For listening. Anytime. She left and Ethan stayed, staring at his cold coffee and wondering how the hell he was supposed to keep pretending this was just two old friends catching up. Lily noticed the shift before he did. "You're smiling more," she said one night while they were washing dishes. "It's weird. I smile." "Not like that, you don't." Ethan handed her a plate to dry. "Like what?" "Like you're thinking about something or someone." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Lily grinned. "When do I get to meet her?" "You don't." "Why not?" "Because it's complicated." "Everything's complicated, Dad. That's not a reason." She had a point, but Ethan wasn't ready. Not yet. Letting Clara back into his life was one thing. Letting her into Lily's was something else entirely, something permanent, something he couldn't take back if it all fell apart. "Soon," he said finally. "Maybe." "That's your favorite word lately." "Yeah, I guess it is." 2 days later, Clara called him at the garage. "Can you come over?" Her voice sounded off, tight, like she was holding something back. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I need to talk to someone, please." Ethan glanced at the clock. 3:30. Lily wouldn't be home from school for another hour. "I'll be there in 10. He drove to the Whitmore house faster than he should have, his mind running through a dozen worst-case scenarios. When he pulled into the driveway, Clara was sitting on the front porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees. She looked up when he approached, and he saw the redness around her eyes. "She's gone," Clara said. Ethan sat down beside her. "When?" "This morning, around 11. I was with her. She just stopped breathing." "I'm sorry." "Don't." Clara shook her head. "Everyone keeps saying that, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. I'm not even sure what I'm feeling." "Relief, maybe? Is that awful?" "No, it's human. I should be sadder. She was my mother." "You've been grieving for weeks, Clara. Just because she's gone now doesn't mean you have to start over." She looked at him, and something in her expression broke. Ethan pulled her against him, and she buried her face in his shoulder, her body shaking with silent sobs. He didn't say anything, just held her while she fell apart. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy, and her eyes were swollen, but she looked a little less fragile. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to thank me. I don't have anyone else." "That's not true." "It is. My dad died 10 years ago. I don't have siblings. My ex-husband barely talks to me. My friends from high school all moved away or forgot about me." She laughed bitterly. "I spent 18 years building a life somewhere else, and I don't have a single person I could call right now except you." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just stayed. They sat on the porch for hours, talking about nothing and everything. Clara told him about her mother's last words, something about forgiveness and letting go that she couldn't quite make sense of. Ethan told her about the first time Lily asked why her mom wasn't coming back, and how he'd locked himself in the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes because he didn't know how to explain death to a 7-year-old. "You're a good dad," Clara said. "I'm trying. That's all anyone can do." When the sun started setting, Ethan stood. "I should get home. Lily's probably wondering where I am." "Yeah, okay." "You going to be all right?" Clara nodded, but he didn't believe her. He didn't think she believed herself either. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "I will." He made it halfway to his truck before he turned back. Clara was still sitting on the steps, staring at nothing. "Come to dinner," he said. She looked up. "What?" "Tomorrow night, at my place. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread. But you shouldn't be alone right now." "Ethan, I don't want to intrude." "You're not. Come at 6. He didn't wait for her to argue, just got in his truck and drove away before he could second-guess himself. When he got home, Lily was in the kitchen, eating cereal straight from the box. "Where were you?" she asked. "Clara's mom died." Lily's eyes widened. "Oh, is she okay?" "Not really." "That sucks." "Yeah," Lily chewed thoughtfully. "Is she coming over?" "Tomorrow, for dinner." "So I'm finally meeting her?" "Looks like it," Lily grinned. "Good, I want to see what all the fuss is about." The next day, Ethan spent way too much time cleaning the house. He scrubbed the kitchen counters, vacuumed the living room, even wiped down the bathroom mirror. Lily watched him with barely concealed amusement. "You know it's just spaghetti, right?" she said. I know. Then why are you acting like the president's coming over? I'm not. You're wearing a button-up shirt. You never wear button-up shirts. Ethan looked down at himself. She had a point. Just go do your homework, he muttered. Lily laughed and disappeared into her room. Clara arrived at 6 on the dot, holding a bottle of wine. She looked tired, exhausted really, but she'd made an effort. Clean jeans, a simple sweater, her hair pulled back. When Ethan opened the door, she gave him a small, uncertain smile. Hi. Hi, come in. She stepped inside, glancing around. This is nice. Cozy. Small is the word you're looking for. Small can be cozy. Lily appeared from the hallway, arms crossed, studying Clara with the kind of scrutiny only a 13-year-old could pull off. You must be Lily, Clara said, and you must be the woman my dad's been sneaking off to see. Lily, Ethan warned. What? It's true. Clara laughed, a real laugh, the first one Ethan had heard from her in days. It's nice to meet you, Lily. Yeah, you too, I guess. Dinner was awkward at first. Lily asked a lot of questions, where Clara had lived, what she did for work, why she'd come back. Clara answered patiently, and slowly, the tension started to ease. By the time they finished eating, Lily was telling Clara about her science project, and Clara was asking follow-up questions like she actually cared. Ethan watched them, something warm and unfamiliar settling in his chest. After dinner, Lily excused herself to finish her homework, leaving Ethan and Clara alone in the kitchen. They cleaned up together, falling into an easy rhythm, Ethan washing, Clara drying. She's great, Clara said. You've done a good job with her. I got lucky. She's smart enough to raise herself. I don't think that's true. Ethan handed her the last plate. Thanks for coming. I know it's not easy right now. It's better than being alone. They moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch with mugs of tea. Clara tucked her legs under her, staring into her cup. I have to go back to Chicago, she said quietly. After the funeral. There's stuff I need to take care of. The apartment, my job, all the things I left hanging when I came here. Ethan's stomach dropped. When? A week, maybe 2. And then what? I don't know. Clara looked at him. I've been thinking about selling the house. My mom left it to me and I can't see myself living here. But I don't know if I want to go back to Chicago either. It doesn't feel like home anymore. What does? She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. I haven't had a home in a long time. Ethan set his mug down and moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel him there. You don't have to figure it all out right now, he said. I feel like I do. I feel like I've been drifting for 18 years. And if I don't make a decision soon, I'm going to wake up one day and realize I wasted my whole life waiting for the right moment. Then stop waiting. Clara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. What are you saying? I'm saying you don't have to go back. Not if you don't want to. Ethan, I'm not asking you to stay for me. I'm asking you to stay for you because you want to. Because this place, this town, these people, maybe they're not so bad. Maybe they're worth sticking around for. And if I do, if I stay, what then? Then we figure it out, together. Clara's breath caught. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. We're the ones making it complicated. She stared at him for a long moment, and Ethan could see the war happening behind her eyes, fear and hope, and something else he couldn't quite name. Then slowly, she reached out and took his hand. I'm scared, she said. Me too. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? Clara laughed, a shaky, watery sound. When did you get so optimistic? I'm not. I'm terrified. But I'm more scared of letting you leave again. She squeezed his hand. Okay. Okay? I'll stay, for now, and we'll see what happens. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been wound tight for 18 years. He lifted her hand and pressed it against his cheek, and Clara leaned into him, her forehead resting against his shoulder. They stayed like that for a long time, not saying anything, just existing in the same space. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't some grand romantic gesture, but it was real. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. A week later, they buried Clara's mother in the town cemetery, under the oak tree near the east fence. It was a small service, a handful of neighbors, a few distant relatives Clara barely knew, and Ethan. He stood beside her while the pastor spoke, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. When it was over, Clara placed a single white rose on the casket and walked away without looking back. That night, she showed up at Ethan's garage unannounced. "Can I help with something?" she asked. Ethan looked up from the engine he was working on. "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I want to. I need to do something with my hands or I'm going to lose my mind." He handed her a wrench. "All right, let's see what you've got." She wasn't great at first. Stripped a bolt, dropped a socket wrench on her foot, swore like a sailor when she scraped her knuckles on a radiator hose. But she didn't quit, and by the end of the night, she'd helped him finish the job. "Not bad," Ethan said, wiping his hands on a rag. Clara grinned, her face smudged with grease. "I'm a fast learner." "Yeah, you are." She came back the next night, and the night after that. At first, it was just something to keep her busy, but then it became more. She started organizing the office, updating his invoices, reaching out to old customers who'd stopped coming by. Within 2 weeks, the garage had more business than it had seen in months. "You're good at this," Ethan said one afternoon, watching her charm a customer over the phone. "I worked in marketing for 15 years. This is just sales with a different product." "Still, I couldn't do it." "That's because you hate people." "I don't hate people. You tolerate them. There's a difference." She wasn't wrong. Lily warmed to Clara faster than Ethan expected. She started hanging out at the garage after school, doing homework at the front desk while Clara answered calls. Sometimes they'd talk about school, about boys, about nothing in particular. Ethan would catch glimpses of them laughing together, and something in his chest would tighten in the best possible way. One night, Lily cornered him in the kitchen. "I like her," she said. "Yeah? Yeah, she's cool, and she makes you less grumpy." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I'm not grumpy." "You're totally grumpy. But it's fine. Everyone has their thing." "Thanks, Lil," she grinned. "Are you guys, like, together? "It's complicated." "That's a yes." "It's not a yes." "Dad, come on. I'm 13, not stupid." Ethan sighed. "We're figuring it out." "Good. Because if you mess this up, I'm going to be really disappointed in you." "No pressure." "None at all." She left, and Ethan stood there, shaking his head. When had his daughter gotten so perceptive? A month after the funeral, Clara signed the papers to sell her mother's house. She moved into a small apartment above the hardware store on Main Street. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. Ethan helped her move in, hauling boxes up the narrow staircase while Clara directed traffic. "That one goes in the bedroom." "No, the other bedroom. Actually, just put it in the corner. I'll deal with it later." "You're terrible at this," Ethan said, setting the box down. "I'm great at this. You're just not following instructions." "Your instructions don't make sense." Clara laughed and kissed him on the cheek. It was quick, casual, but it left him standing there like an idiot, grinning at nothing. That night, they ordered pizza and sat on the floor of her empty living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. Clara leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not giving up on me." "I should be thanking you. You turned my garage into an actual business. We make a good team." "Yeah, we do." She tilted her head up, and their eyes met. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Slowly, carefully, he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't like the movies. It wasn't fireworks or violins or some grand, sweeping moment. It was soft and tentative and a little clumsy, like they were both out of practice. But it was real, and when they pulled apart, Clara was smiling. "Took you long enough," she said. "I was waiting for the right moment." "There's no such thing as the right moment, Ethan. There's just moments, and you either take them or you don't." "Then I'm taking this one." He kissed her again, and this time neither of them pulled away. The kiss changed things, not in some dramatic, earth-shattering way, but in the quiet shift of how they moved around each other. Ethan found himself reaching for Clara's hand without thinking. She'd lean against him while they worked side by side at the garage, her shoulder pressed to his arm like it belonged there. Small touches, stolen moments. Nothing they announced to the world, but nothing they hid either. Lily noticed immediately. "So, you guys are definitely together now," she said one morning over breakfast, not even looking up from her phone. Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. "What makes you say that?" "Because you came home at midnight last night smelling like her perfume, and you've been grinning at your eggs for the past 5 minutes." "I don't grin. You're doing it right now." He was. He couldn't help it. "Are you okay with this?" Ethan asked, setting his mug down. "With me and Clara?" Lily finally looked up, her expression serious. "Are you happy?" "Yeah, I think so." "Then I'm okay with it." She paused. "Just don't be weird about it. I don't need you two making out in front of me or whatever. We're not good. Keep it that way." She grabbed her backpack and headed for the door, leaving Ethan sitting there wondering when his daughter had become the adult in their relationship. The truth was, he was happy. Happier than he'd been in years. But happiness came with complications, and those complications had a way of sneaking up when he least expected them. The first real fight happened 3 weeks later. Clara had been pushing him to expand the business, hire another mechanic, maybe open a second bay, start advertising online. She'd drawn up a whole plan, complete with projected costs and potential revenue. Ethan had listened politely, nodded in all the right places, and then told her no. "Why not?" Clara asked, her voice tight. They were in the garage office, surrounded by invoices and work orders. It was late, nearly 9, and they were both exhausted. "Because it's too risky," Ethan said. "I can barely keep up with what I've got now. Adding more just means more ways to fail. Or more ways to succeed. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who'd be on the hook if it all falls apart." Clara's eyes flashed. "Excuse me? I didn't mean—" "No, you did. You think I don't understand risk? I left a marriage. I quit my job. I moved back to a town I swore I'd never return to. Don't tell me I don't know what it's like to put everything on the line." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Ethan?" He didn't have a good answer. The truth was, he was scared. Scared of taking a chance and losing everything. Scared of building something bigger only to watch it crumble. Scared that if he reached for more, he'd end up with nothing. "I'm saying I'm not ready," he said finally. Clara stared at him for a long moment, then grabbed her jacket. "Fine. Then don't be ready. But don't expect me to just stand around and watch you play it safe for the rest of your life." She left, and the office felt colder without her. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He kept replaying the fight in his head, trying to figure out where it had gone wrong. By morning, he still didn't have an answer. He called her around 10. She didn't pick up. He tried again at noon. Still nothing. By 3, he was standing outside her apartment, knocking on the door. Clara opened it, looking as tired as he felt. "What do you want, Ethan?" "To apologize." "For what?" "For being an ass, for shutting you down, for making you feel like your opinion doesn't matter." She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "I wasn't trying to take over your business." "I know." "I was trying to help. Because I see what you've built, and I think it could be more. I think you could be more." "I know that too," Clara sighed. "Then why won't you let me in?" "Because I'm terrified," Ethan said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "Every time I've let myself want something, really want it, it gets taken away. My parents, Sarah, you, the first time around. And I know that's not fair to you, but I don't know how to turn it off." Her expression softened. "You think I'm not scared? I spent 18 years running from this town, from you, from everything that reminded me of the life I could have had. And now I'm back, and I'm falling for you all over again, and it's terrifying, but I'm doing it anyway, because the alternative, walking away, playing it safe, that's worse." Ethan reached for her hand. "I don't want to lose you again." "Then stop pushing me away." "I'm trying. Try harder." She pulled him inside and kissed him, hard and desperate, like she was trying to prove a point. When they finally broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I'll think about it," he said. "The expansion. I'll look at your plan. That's all I'm asking." They spent the rest of the afternoon going over the numbers. Clara walked him through every detail, answering his questions, addressing his concerns. By the time the sun started setting, Ethan had to admit, it wasn't as crazy as he'd thought. "All right," he said. Let's do it. Clara's face lit up. Really? Yeah, but we start small, one new mechanic, see how it goes. Deal. She threw her arms around him, and Ethan held her tight, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he could let himself believe in something again. Hiring someone turned out to be harder than expected. The first guy they interviewed showed up drunk. The second couldn't tell a carburetor from a catalytic converter. The third seemed promising until he asked if he could bring his pet snake to work. This is hopeless, Ethan muttered after the fifth candidate walked out. Clara flipped through the remaining applications. There's one more. Danny Ortiz. Says here he's got 10 years of experience and solid references. Fine. Set it up. Danny showed up the next day. Early 30s, stocky build, tattoos running up both arms. He had a firm handshake and an easy smile, and when Ethan asked him to diagnose a problem with a stubborn transmission, Danny had it figured out in under 10 minutes. You're hired, Ethan said. Danny grinned. Just like that? Just like that. When can you start? Tomorrow work for you? Perfect. Danny turned out to be exactly what they needed. He was fast, efficient, and didn't mind getting his hands dirty. More importantly, he got along with everyone. Customers loved him, and even Lily admitted he was cool when she stopped by after school one day. With Danny handling the overflow, Ethan finally had time to breathe. He started leaving the garage at a reasonable hour, spending evenings with Clara and Lily. They fell into a routine that felt almost normal. Dinners together, movie nights, weekends where they'd drive out to the lake and just exist. But normal didn't mean easy. One Saturday, Clara suggested they take a trip to the state park about an hour away. Lily had a sleepover, so it was just the two of them. They hiked one of the trails, stopping at a lookout point that offered a view of the valley below. Clara leaned against the railing, staring out at the endless stretch of trees. I used to come here when I was a kid. My dad would pack sandwiches and we'd spend the whole day exploring. Sounds nice. It was, before everything got complicated. She turned to him. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if things had gone differently? All the time. Do you regret it? Any of it? Ethan thought about that. About Sarah. About Lily. About all the years he'd spent alone, convincing himself he was fine. No, he said finally. I regret losing you, but I don't regret the life I had. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Clara nodded slowly. I regret leaving. I've spent 18 years telling myself I made the right choice, but I don't think I did. I think I was just too scared to stay. You're here now. Yeah, I am. She looked at him, her eyes searching his. What are we doing, Ethan? Really? I don't know. Figuring it out? That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Clara laughed, shaking her head. We're a mess, you know that? Yeah, but we're a mess together. Is that supposed to be romantic? I don't know. Is it working? She kissed him, and Ethan decided it must be. They drove back as the sun was setting, the sky streaked with orange and pink. Clara fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window. Ethan glanced over at her, and something in his chest tightened. He'd spent so long protecting himself from feeling too much, and now here he was, completely exposed. It should have terrified him, but it didn't. When they got back to town, Ethan pulled up to Clara's apartment. She stirred, blinking awake. We're here, he said softly. Already? She yawned, stretching. Thanks for today. I needed that. Yeah, me too. She leaned over and kissed him goodnight, her hand lingering on his cheek. See you tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow. She climbed out, and Ethan watched until she disappeared inside. Then he sat there for a while, engine idling, trying to figure out how he'd gotten so lucky. The next few weeks blurred together in the best way. Business was steady. Danny was working out great. Clara had taken over most of the administrative side of things, and customers were actually coming back instead of disappearing to the chain shops in Riverside. One afternoon, Ethan was under a Honda Civic when Danny rolled over on a creeper, grinning. So you and Clara, huh? Ethan didn't look up. What about it? Nothing, just saying, she's good for you. You've been way less miserable since she showed up. I wasn't miserable. Dude, you were totally miserable. You just didn't know it. Ethan slid out from under the car, wiping his hands. You got a point, or are you just here to give me life advice? Danny laughed. Just making conversation. But seriously, don't screw it up. Women like that don't come around twice. She already did. Then definitely don't screw it up. Ethan threw a rag at him, but he was smiling. That night, Clara came over for dinner. Lily had made spaghetti, her version of it anyway, which involved way too much garlic and not enough salt. But they ate it without complaint, and afterward, Lily disappeared to her room to video chat with friends. Ethan and Clara sat on the couch, her feet tucked under his leg, both of them too full to move. "I've been thinking," Clara said. "About? About us. About what this is." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Okay. I'm not good at this. Relationships. I spent 10 years in a marriage that didn't work because I was too stubborn to admit it wasn't right. And then I spent 2 years alone, convincing myself I was better off that way. Where are you going with this?" "I'm going somewhere. Just let me finish." She took a breath. "What I'm trying to say is, I don't want to mess this up. You and Lily, this life you've built, it matters to me. And I don't want to be the person who comes in and ruins it because I don't know how to do this right." "You're not going to ruin anything. You don't know that." "Yeah, I do." Ethan turned to face her. "You're not the same person who left 18 years ago. And I'm not the same guy who let you go. We've both screwed up enough to know what not to do. That's got to count for something." Clara's eyes were shining. "You really believe that?" "Yeah, I do." She kissed him, slow and soft, and when she pulled back, she was smiling. "Okay, then let's do this for real." "Do what?" "This. Us. No more maybe or we'll see. I want to be with you, Ethan. Fully, completely. No holding back." Ethan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him, but in the best possible way. "Yeah, okay, yes." Clara laughed. "That's 3 different answers. They all mean the same thing." "Good." They stayed up late talking, making plans that felt both impossible and inevitable. Clara mentioned selling her apartment and finding a bigger place. Ethan suggested she move in with him and Lily, then immediately backtracked, worried it was too soon. Clara told him to stop overthinking it. They went back and forth until they were both too tired to argue, and Clara fell asleep on his shoulder while some late-night talk show droned in the background. Ethan sat there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like his whole life had just shifted into something he didn't quite recognize. But for once, he wasn't scared. He was ready. The next morning, he woke up to find Clara already gone. There was a note on the coffee table. "Had to run errands. See you at the garage." "See." Ethan smiled and headed to the kitchen, where Lily was eating cereal. "She stayed over?" Lily asked, not looking up. "On the couch. We fell asleep watching TV." "Uh-huh. It's the truth." "I believe you. Doesn't mean I'm not going to give you a hard time about it." Ethan poured himself coffee. "You're too much like your mother." "I know. It's one of my best qualities." He couldn't argue with that. Later that day, Clara showed up at the garage with lunch, sandwiches from the deli on Main Street and 2 iced teas. They ate in the office, Danny handling the front while they took a break. "I talked to my landlord this morning," Clara said between bites. "Told him I'm not renewing the lease." Ethan paused mid-chew. "You're serious about moving in?" "If the offer's still on the table." "It is. But are you sure? It's not exactly spacious." "I don't need spacious. I need you." She grinned. "And Lily. And honestly, the idea of not having to lug groceries up 3 flights of stairs anymore is pretty appealing." "When?" "End of the month. That gives me time to pack and figure out what I'm keeping." "All right, let's do it." Clara leaned across the desk and kissed him. "You're not going to regret this." "I know." And he meant it. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan wasn't looking over his shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was just here, present, living in the moment instead of bracing for the next disaster. It felt strange, but it also felt right. That night, Ethan sat Lily down and told her the plan. She took it better than expected. "Cool," she said. "Does this mean she's going to help with laundry? Because you're terrible at it." "I'm not terrible." "Dad, you turned my white shirt pink last week." "That was an accident. It was negligence." Ethan sighed. "Yes, Claire will probably help with laundry. Then I'm in." "That's it? That's all you've got to say?" Lily shrugged. "I like her. She makes you happy. And honestly, having another adult around who actually knows how to cook sounds great." "I can cook." You can burn things. That's not the same. You're grounded. No, I'm not. She was right. She wasn't. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of packing, organizing, and rearranging furniture to make room for Clara's things. Ethan cleared out half the closet in his bedroom, moved boxes in the garage to create space for her car, and even repainted the guest room at Clara's insistence. It's depressing, she said, staring at the faded beige walls. We need color. It's fine. It's not fine. It looks like a prison cell. What color do you want? I don't know, something warm. Maybe a soft yellow? Yellow. Yes, yellow. It's cheerful. Ethan hated yellow, but he painted it anyway because Clara's smile when she saw the finished room was worth every brushstroke. On moving day, Danny showed up with his truck to help haul the bigger furniture. Between the three of them, they had everything loaded and unloaded in under 4 hours. By the time the sun started setting, Clara's apartment was empty, and Ethan's house was full. They stood in the living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and Clara let out a long breath. This is real, she said. Yeah, it is. Are you freaking out? A little. You? A lot? Ethan pulled her close. We'll figure it out. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Clara laughed and buried her face in his chest. I hope you're right. That night, after Lily had gone to bed and the house had finally quieted down, Ethan and Clara sat on the back porch, sharing a beer and staring up at the stars. It was cool out, the kind of late autumn night where you could feel winter creeping in around the edges. Thank you, Clara said softly. For what? For giving me a second chance. For not holding the past against me. You gave me one too. Yeah, I guess we're even. Ethan took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I want you here. With me. With Lily. For as long as you'll stay. Clara turned to him, her eyes bright in the dim light. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. Not this time. Promise? Promise. And when she kissed him, Ethan believed her. Living together was harder than either of them expected. Not because they didn't love each other. They did. But love didn't stop Clara from leaving her coffee cups all over the house, or prevent Ethan from forgetting to close the cabinets after he grabbed something. Love didn't make the bathroom any bigger when they were both trying to get ready in the morning, or stop them from bickering over whose turn it was to do the dishes. The first real argument happened 2 weeks in. Ethan came home from the garage to find Clara rearranging the living room. The couch was against the wrong wall, the TV was unplugged and sitting in the middle of the floor, and half the furniture was pushed into corners like she'd given up halfway through. What are you doing? He asked, dropping his keys on the counter. Making it better. The flow was all wrong. The flow was fine. It wasn't. Trust me. Ethan looked around at the chaos. Clara, I've had the furniture like this for 6 years. Exactly. It needed updating. I didn't ask you to update it. She stopped, turning to face him. Are you seriously mad about this? I'm not mad. I come home after a 12-hour day, and my house looks like a tornado hit it. Our house. What? Our house, Ethan. Not your house. Ours. The words hung between them, sharp and loaded. Ethan rubbed his face, suddenly exhausted. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just tired. Clara's expression softened. I know, and I should have asked before moving everything. I just thought it would be a nice surprise. It is. I'm just not good with surprises. I'm noticing that. She walked over and wrapped her arms around him, and Ethan let himself lean into her. They stood like that for a while, surrounded by displaced furniture, until the tension bled out of both of them. Help me finish? Claire asked. Yeah, okay. They spent the next hour putting the room back together, and by the time they were done, Ethan had to admit, it did look better. Lily found the whole thing hilarious. You guys fought about furniture? She said over dinner that night, grinning. We didn't fight, Ethan said. We had a disagreement. Same thing. It's not, Clara laughed. She's got a point. Don't encourage her. Lily speared a piece of broccoli with her fork. For the record, the living room does look better now. Dad's got terrible taste. I have great taste. You have functional taste. There's a difference. Ethan looked at Clara. See what I've been dealing with for 13 years? She's smart. I like her. Of course you do. You're teaming up against me. That's the plan. Clara said, winking at Lily. Ethan shook his head, but he was smiling. This was what he'd wanted, wasn't it? A family that felt whole. People who cared about each other enough to give him a hard time. It was messy and chaotic, and nothing like the quiet, controlled life he'd built after Sarah died. But it was better. So much better. The garage continued to grow. Word spread that Hayes Auto was under new management. Well, not exactly new management, but Clara's influence was everywhere. She'd updated their website, set up social media accounts, and even ran a promotion that brought in a steady stream of new customers. Danny was handling most of the overflow, and Ethan had started to think about hiring a second mechanic. One afternoon, a sleek black Mercedes pulled into the lot. Ethan didn't recognize it, but when the driver stepped out, he recognized the face immediately. Richard Brennan, former quarterback, current real estate developer, one of the richest guys in town, and someone Ethan had gone to high school with, though they'd never been friends. "Hayes," Richard said, extending a hand. "Long time." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag before shaking. "Brennan, what brings you here? Heard you're the guy to see for honest work. My regular guy's been jerking me around, so I figured I'd give you a shot." He gestured to the Mercedes. "Check engine light's been on for a week. No idea what's causing it." "I can take a look." "Appreciate it." Ethan hooked the car up to the diagnostic computer while Richard wandered around the garage, hands in his pockets, taking everything in. When the results came back, Ethan frowned. "Your oxygen sensor's shot," he said. "Easy fix. I can have it done by tomorrow." "How much?" Ethan quoted him a fair price. Richard didn't even blink. "Sounds good. You got a card? I'll send some people your way." "Yeah, hold on." Ethan grabbed one of the new business cards Clara had designed. Clean, professional, nothing fancy. Richard pocketed it and shook his hand again. "Good seeing you, Hayes. You've done well for yourself." "Thanks." After Richard left, Clara came out of the office, eyebrows raised. "Was that Richard Brennan?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" "I went to school with his sister. He's kind of a big deal now, right?" "Apparently." "Did he say he'd send people our way?" "Yeah," Clara grinned. "This is good, Ethan, really good. It's one guy. One guy who knows everyone in this town. If he starts talking us up, we're going to be swamped." Ethan wasn't sure how he felt about that. Part of him liked the idea of the business growing. The other part, the part that had spent years playing it safe, wanted to pump the brakes. But Clara was already 3 steps ahead, talking about hiring another mechanic and maybe expanding the waiting area. And Ethan found himself nodding along, letting her enthusiasm pull him forward. Richard was true to his word. Over the next month, a steady stream of high-end cars started showing up. BMWs, Audis, even a Tesla that Danny spent 2 days figuring out. The garage was busier than it had ever been, and Ethan was working longer hours just to keep up. Clara noticed. "You're exhausted," she said one night, watching him collapse onto the couch. "I'm fine." "You're not. You've been at the garage every day for the past 2 weeks. You need to take a break." "I can't. We're too busy." That's why we hired Danny, and why we're about to hire someone else." "We don't have the space for another mechanic." "Then we make space. Or we find a bigger location." Ethan sat up. "Clara, I'm not moving the garage." "Why not? It makes sense. We're outgrowing this place." "Because it's mine. I built it from nothing, and I'm not just going to pack it up and move because business is good." "That's exactly when you should move. When you have the capital to do it right." "This isn't about capital. It's about—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Never mind." "No, say it." "It's about control, okay? I spent years barely scraping by, and now things are finally working, and you want to change everything. I just need you to slow down." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to take over, Ethan. I'm trying to help you build something that lasts." "I know, but this is my business. I need to make these decisions." "Fine. Make them. But don't expect me to just sit back and watch you sabotage yourself because you're too scared to take a risk." She got up and walked to the bedroom, closing the door a little harder than necessary. Ethan sat there, staring at the wall, feeling like he'd just stepped on a landmine. They didn't talk much over the next few days. Clara was polite but distant, focusing on her work at the garage and avoiding anything that felt too personal. Ethan hated it, hated the coldness that had crept into the space between them. Lily noticed too. "You guys fighting again?" she asked one morning. "We're not fighting." Then why does it feel like someone died? Ethan sighed. It's complicated. Everything with you two is complicated. She wasn't wrong. That night, Ethan found Clara in the office, going over invoices. He knocked on the door frame, and she looked up. Can we talk? He asked. About? About the fact that I've been an idiot. Clara set down her pen. I'm listening. Ethan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. You were right. About expanding, about taking risks. I've been so focused on not losing what I have that I forgot to think about what I could build. So what are you saying? I'm saying let's do it. Let's find a bigger space, hire more people, grow this thing into something real. Clara stood, crossing her arms. You're sure? No, but I trust you, and I'd rather take the risk with you than play it safe alone. Her expression softened, and she walked over to him, resting her hands on his chest. You're not going to regret this. I might. Then I'll remind you why you did it. She kissed him, and Ethan felt the tension that had been coiled in his chest for days finally start to unravel. Over the next few weeks, they started looking for a new location. It took a while. Most of the commercial spaces in town were either too small or too expensive, but eventually they found a warehouse on the edge of town. It was bigger than they needed, a little run down, but it had good bones, and the rent was manageable. Ethan signed the lease on a Thursday afternoon, his hand shaking slightly as he put pen to paper. Clara stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, and when he finished, she squeezed gently. This is going to be amazing, she said, or a complete disaster. Either way, we're in it together. They spent the next 2 months transforming the space. Danny helped with the heavy lifting, and Lily even pitched in on weekends, painting walls and organizing tools. It was exhausting, but there was something satisfying about watching the place come together piece by piece. By the time they opened, Hayes Auto Repair had gone from a one-man operation in a cramped garage to a legitimate business with 3 bays, 2 mechanics, and a waiting room that didn't look like it belonged in a horror movie. The grand opening was small. Just a few customers, some friends from town, and a reporter from the local paper who wrote a short piece about their expansion. But it felt significant, like they'd turned a corner and there was no going back. That night, Ethan stood in the empty shop, looking around at everything they'd built. Clara came up beside him, slipping her hand into his. What are you thinking? She asked. That I can't believe we actually did this. You sound surprised. I am. I've spent so long just trying to survive, I forgot what it felt like to actually build something. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. You've been building things your whole life, Ethan. You just didn't give yourself credit for it. Maybe. They stood there in the quiet, the smell of fresh paint and motor oil hanging in the air, and Ethan felt something shift inside him. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't just reacting to life. He was shaping it, and that scared the hell out of him. But it also felt right. Business picked up quickly. The new location drew more customers, and word continued to spread. Within a month, they were booked solid 2 weeks out. Ethan hired a third mechanic, a younger guy named Marcus who was fresh out of trade school and eager to learn. Danny took him under his wing, and together they handled most of the day-to-day repairs while Ethan focused on the bigger jobs. Clara managed everything else. She handled the books, dealt with suppliers, coordinated schedules, and somehow still found time to charm every customer who walked through the door. Ethan didn't know how she did it, but he was grateful. One evening, after everyone had gone home, Ethan found Clara in the office, staring at a spreadsheet on her laptop. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing's wrong. We're actually turning a profit. That's good, right? That's great. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, you know? Ethan sat down beside her. Yeah, I know. We've been doing so well. Too well. It makes me nervous. Maybe things are just working out. Clara looked at him. You really believe that? I'm trying to. She smiled, closing her laptop. Me too. They went home that night feeling lighter than they had in weeks. When they walked through the door, Lily was in the kitchen, reheating leftovers. How'd it go? She asked. Good, Ethan said. Really good, actually. Does that mean you guys are going to stop being so stressed all the time? Clara laughed. We'll try. Good, because it's exhausting watching you two worry about everything. When did you get so smart? Ethan asked. I've always been smart. You just haven't been paying attention. She wasn't wrong. That weekend, they took a rare day off. Clara suggested they drive out to the lake, and Ethan agreed, mostly because he couldn't remember the last time they'd done something that wasn't work-related. They packed a picnic, sandwiches, chips, some fruit, and drove out early, before the crowd showed up. The lake was calm, the water reflecting the sky like glass. They found a spot under a tree and spread out a blanket. Lily had opted to stay home, claiming she had too much homework. Ethan suspected she just wanted to give them space, which was both thoughtful and slightly unsettling. She's growing up, Clara said, as if reading his mind. Yeah, too fast. That's what kids do. I know, doesn't make it easier. They ate in comfortable silence, watching a few boats drift across the water. After a while, Clara lay back on the blanket, staring up at the sky. I could get used to this, she said. What, doing nothing? Yeah, just being. No schedules, no pressure, just us. Ethan lay down beside her. Sounds nice. We should do it more often. We should. But they both knew they wouldn't. There was always something that needed doing, bills to pay, customers to call back, problems to solve. That was life. But for now, in this moment, they let themselves pretend it could be different. Clara rolled onto her side, propping her head on her hand. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever think about getting married again? Ethan's breath caught. Where's this coming from? I don't know, just curious. Are you asking if I want to marry you? Clara's cheeks flushed slightly. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just asking in general. Ethan sat up, looking at her. I haven't thought about it. Not seriously. After Sarah, I figured that part of my life was over. And now? Now I don't know. I guess it depends. On what? On whether you want to. Clara sat up too, crossing her legs. I don't know either. Marriage didn't exactly work out great for me the first time. Same. But I like this. What we have, I don't want to mess it up by trying to make it something it's not. Yeah, me too. They sat there, both of them avoiding eye contact, and Ethan realized how ridiculous they were being. We're terrible at this, he said. Clara laughed. The worst. So what do we do? I don't know. Keep figuring it out? That's your solution for everything. Because it works. Ethan shook his head, but he was smiling. All right, we'll keep figuring it out. Good. She kissed him, and they let the conversation drop. There would be time to figure out the rest later. For now, this was enough. The drive home was quiet, but not in a bad way. Clara fell asleep again, her hand resting on his leg, and Ethan focused on the road, letting his mind wander. He thought about everything that had changed over the past year. Clara coming back, the garage expanding, Lily growing up. His whole life had shifted, and for the first time, he wasn't resisting it. He was letting it happen. And that felt like progress. When they got home, Lily was sprawled on the couch, watching some show on her laptop. She glanced up when they walked in. Have fun? Yeah, Ethan said. It was nice. Good. You guys needed it. Clara sat down beside her. What are you watching? Some documentary about space. It's actually pretty cool. Can I watch with you? Sure. Ethan left them there, heading to the kitchen to grab a beer. He stood at the sink, looking out the window at the backyard, and felt something settle in his chest. This was his life now. Messy, complicated, imperfect, but his. And he wouldn't trade it for anything. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan and Clara sat on the back porch, sharing a bottle of wine. The air was cool, the stars bright overhead. I've been thinking, Clara said. About? About what you said at the lake. About marriage. Ethan set his glass down. Okay, I don't need a ring or a ceremony or any of that, but I do need to know that we're in this for the long haul, that you're not going to wake up one day and decide you're better off without me. Clara, let me finish. She took a breath. I spent 18 years running because I was scared of being stuck, and now I'm here, and I'm scared of losing this, losing you. And I just need to know that you're as committed to this as I am. Ethan reached for her hand. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. You can't know that. Yeah, I can, because I've already lost you once, and I'm not doing it again. Whatever it takes, whatever we have to work through, I'm in. Completely. Clara's eyes were shining. You mean that? Yeah, I do. She kissed him, and when they pulled apart, she was smiling. Okay, then we're good. We're good. They sat there for a while longer, holding hands, watching the stars. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like everything was exactly where it needed to be. The conversation on the porch became a turning point, though neither of them realized it at the time. They'd said what needed saying, made their promises, and let the rest unfold naturally. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just two people choosing each other day after day, in all the small ways that mattered. Winter came early that year. By mid-November, the first snow had already fallen, blanketing the town in white. The garage stayed busy, people needed their cars winterized, tires changed, batteries checked. Ethan worked long hours, but he didn't mind as much anymore. Clara was there, handling the chaos with a calm efficiency that still amazed him. Danny and Marcus had the rhythm down, and the business ran smoother than it ever had. One Saturday morning, Lily appeared in the garage doorway, bundled in her winter coat and scarf. I need to talk to you, she said. Ethan looked up from the engine he was working on. What's up? In private. He glanced at Clara, who raised her eyebrows but said nothing. Ethan wiped his hands and followed Lily outside, where the cold hit him immediately. This better be important, he said. It's freezing. It is. Lily took a breath, her breath visible in the air. I want to ask Clara something, but I wanted to check with you first. Okay, what is it? I want to ask if she'd consider, I don't know, being more official, like not just Dad's girlfriend, more like family. Ethan's chest tightened. What do you mean? I mean, she's already basically my stepmom. She helps with homework, makes dinner, does all the stuff Mom used to do, but she's not official, and I want her to be. Lily, I know it's weird, and I know you guys aren't married or anything, but I like having her around. She makes things better, and I just thought maybe we could, I don't know, make it official somehow. Ethan stared at his daughter, who was growing up way too fast and saying things that made his heart ache in the best way. Have you talked to Clara about this? He asked. No. I wanted to ask you first. Why? Because you're my dad, and I wanted to make sure you were okay with it. Ethan pulled her into a hug. Yeah, kiddo, I'm okay with it. So I can ask her. Yeah, you can ask her. Lily grinned and ran back inside, leaving Ethan standing in the cold, wondering how he'd gotten so lucky. That night, after dinner, Lily cornered Clara in the living room. Ethan watched from the kitchen, pretending to do dishes while eavesdropping shamelessly. Can I ask you something? Lily said. Of course. Do you think of me as family? Clara didn't hesitate. Yes, absolutely. Good. Because I think of you that way too. Lily paused. I know you're not my mom, and I'm not trying to replace her or anything, but you're important to me, and I just wanted you to know that. Clara's eyes were shining. That means a lot, Lily. More than you know. Cool. Just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. Lily got up and headed to her room, leaving Clara sitting there, visibly emotional. Ethan walked over and sat down beside her. You okay? He asked. Yeah, She wiped her eyes. That kid is something else. She gets it from her mother. She gets it from you too. Ethan put his arm around her and Clara leaned into him. They sat like that for a while, not saying anything, just being together. A week later, Ethan woke up to find Clara already gone. There was a note on the nightstand. Had to run an errand. Be back soon. See. He didn't think much of it. Clara was always running errands, picking up supplies, dealing with vendors. But when she came back 2 hours later, she looked nervous. What's wrong? Ethan asked. Nothing's wrong. Can we talk? Yeah, of course. They sat at the kitchen table and Clara pulled a folder out of her bag. She set it in front of him, her hands shaking slightly. What's this? Ethan asked. Open it. He did. Inside were documents, legal papers, adoption forms, information about step-parent adoption in their state. Ethan looked up at her, his heart pounding. Clara, I've been thinking about what Lily said, about being official. And I know we're not married, and I know this is probably crazy, but I want to be her stepmom, legally. if you'll let me. You want to adopt her? Not adopt. Not exactly. But there's a process for step-parents. Even without marriage, we can make it official. Give me legal rights. Make me part of her life in a way that matters. Clara's voice cracked. I love her, Ethan. I love both of you. And I want this to be real. Not just living together. Not just playing house. Real. Ethan couldn't speak. He just stared at the papers, his throat tight. Say something, Clara whispered. Yes. Yes? Yeah, yes, let's do it. Clara let out a shaky laugh and threw her arms around him. You're sure? I'm sure. They told Lily that night. She cried, which she never did, and then immediately tried to play it off like she had something in her eye. Clara hugged her tight, and Ethan watched the two most important people in his life hold on to each other, and he felt something break open inside him. Something good. The paperwork took months, lawyers, interviews, background checks. It was exhausting and invasive and frustrating, but they pushed through, and by the time spring rolled around, everything was finalized. Clara was officially Lily's legal guardian, her stepmother in every sense that mattered. They didn't have a party or make a big deal out of it. Just the three of them at the courthouse, signing papers and taking a photo that Lily insisted on posting to social media with the caption, "Got a stepmom today. She's pretty cool, I guess." Clara had laughed until she cried. That night, they went out to dinner. Nothing fancy, just the diner on Main Street that Lily loved. They ordered too much food, talked about nothing important, and when they got home, Ethan stood in the doorway watching Clara and Lily argue about what movie to watch. They were family now, officially, and it felt right, but life didn't stop throwing challenges just because things were good. In late spring, the garage hit a rough patch. A supplier went out of business, leaving them scrambling for parts. One of their biggest clients pulled their contract, citing budget cuts. And Marcus quit without warning, taking a job in the city that paid better. Ethan tried not to panic, but it was hard. They'd built something great, and now it felt like it was slipping through his fingers. We'll figure it out, Clara said one night, going over the books. We're down 15% this month. I know, but it's temporary. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because we've been through worse, and we made it. We'll make it through this too. Ethan wanted to believe her, but doubt had a way of creeping in when things got hard. They cut costs where they could. Ethan picked up extra shifts. Danny took on more hours. Clara renegotiated contracts with vendors and somehow convinced 2 new clients to sign on. Slowly, over the course of a few months, they clawed their way back. By summer, they were stable again. Not thriving, but surviving, and that was enough. One evening, Ethan found Clara sitting on the back porch, staring at the sunset. He sat down beside her, handing her a beer. Rough day? He asked. Not really, just thinking. About? About how far we've come. A year ago, I was living in Chicago, miserable, with no idea what I was doing with my life, and now I'm here, with you, with Lily, running a business I actually care about. Regret it? Not for a second. She looked at him. Do you? No, but I'm scared sometimes. Of what? Of losing this. Of screwing it up. Of waking up one day and realizing it was all too good to be true. Clara took his hand. You're not going to screw it up, Ethan. We're going to fight sometimes. We're going to have bad days, but we're not going anywhere. None of us. Promise? Promise. They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. And Ethan let himself believe her. In August, Lily started high school. She was nervous, though she'd never admit it. Ethan drove her on the first day, and when he pulled up to the school, she sat in the passenger seat, not moving. You okay? He asked. Yeah, just, what if I don't fit in? Then you'll figure it out. You always do. What if I fail? Then you'll try again. Lily looked at him. You're terrible at pep talks. I know. She smiled, and Ethan felt a pang in his chest. She was so grown up now, so much like Sarah, so much like him. You've got this, he said. Yeah, I do. She got out of the car and walked toward the school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her head held high. Ethan watched until she disappeared inside, then drove to the garage with a lump in his throat. Clara noticed immediately. How'd it go? She's fine. I'm a mess. She's growing up. Too fast. That's what they do. Ethan sighed. I know. Doesn't make it easier. Clara kissed him on the cheek. You're a good dad. I'm trying. That's all anyone can do. That fall, Clara brought up the marriage conversation again. They were in bed, the lights off, both too tired to sleep. Do you ever think about it? She asked. About what? Getting married. Ethan rolled over to face her. You asked me this before. I know, but that was months ago. Things are different now. How so? We're more settled. The business is stable. Lily's good. Everything's good. So I'm asking again, do you want to marry me? Ethan's heart was pounding. Are you proposing? Maybe? Would you say yes? I don't know. Are you asking? Clara laughed. You're impossible, Suas. You're the one who brought it up. Because I want to know what you're thinking. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then said, I don't need a piece of paper to tell me we're committed. But if you want it, if it's important to you, then yeah, I'll marry you. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. It wasn't a proposal. You're the one asking. Fine. Ethan Hayes, will you marry me? He smiled in the dark. Yeah, I will. Clara kissed him, and they stayed like that for a long time, wrapped up in each other, not talking, just being. They didn't tell anyone right away. It felt like something private, something that belonged just to them. But eventually, Lily figured it out. Are you guys getting married? She asked one morning over breakfast. Ethan and Clara exchanged a glance. How'd you know? Clara asked. Because you've been acting weird, in a good way, like you have a secret. We do, Ethan said. We're getting married, Lily grinned. About time. You're not surprised. Not even a little. You guys are gross. Like, we're not gross. You're totally gross, but in a cute way. Clara laughed, and Ethan shook his head. Thanks, Lil. Anytime. They got married in October, on a Saturday afternoon at the courthouse. It was just the three of them and Danny, who served as a witness. No fancy dress, no big ceremony, just vows and rings and a kiss that felt like a beginning and an ending all at once. Afterward, they went to the same diner where they'd celebrated Clara becoming Lily's stepmom. They ordered the same too much food, laughed at the same stupid jokes, and when they got home, Lily declared it the best wedding she'd ever been to. It's the only wedding you've ever been to, Ethan said. Exactly. So it's automatically the best. Clara laughed so hard she snorted, and Ethan realized he'd never been happier in his entire life. Winter came again, and with it, a quiet rhythm that felt sustainable. The garage was doing well. Lily was thriving in school. Ethan and Clara had settled into a life that was messy and imperfect, but undeniably theirs. One night, they were lying in bed, the house quiet around them. Clara was half asleep, her head on Ethan's chest, and he was staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 2 years. You awake? He asked. Barely. I love you. Clara smiled against his chest. I love you too. I'm glad you came back. Me too. I'm glad you stayed. Where else would I go? I don't know, but I'm glad you're here. Clara lifted her head, looking at him in the dim light. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. Not ever. I know. Good. She kissed him, then settled back against him, her breathing evening out as she drifted off. Ethan stayed awake a little longer, his hand resting on her back, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breath. This was his life now. Clara, Lily, the garage, a family that had been broken and put back together in a way that was stronger than before. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And it was his. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Hayes wasn't afraid of losing it. He wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop or bracing for the next disaster. He was just here, living, loving, building something that would last. The snow started falling outside, soft and quiet, covering the world in white. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself fall asleep, knowing that when he woke up, Clara would still be there. Lily would still be down the hall. The garage would still be standing, and life would keep moving forward, messy and complicated and beautiful. He'd spent so many years stuck in the past, mourning what he'd lost, afraid to reach for anything new. But Clara had walked back into his life on a stormy night, soaked and shaking, and everything had changed. Not all at once, not easily, but slowly, carefully, they'd built something real, something worth keeping, something worth fighting for. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. He got up, pulled on a shirt, and walked out to find Clara and Lily making pancakes, badly, judging by the smoke and the batter splattered everywhere. "What's going on here?" he asked. "We're making breakfast," Lily said. "It looks like a disaster." "It is a disaster," Clara admitted, "but it's our disaster." Ethan laughed and grabbed a spatula, stepping in to help. They finished the pancakes together, burned edges and all, and ate them at the table while the morning sun streamed through the windows. This was it. This was the life he'd built. Imperfect, chaotic, real. And it was more than enough. Later that day, Ethan stood in the garage watching Danny and the new mechanic they'd hired work on a Toyota. The space was busy, the phones ringing, customers coming and going. Clara was at the front desk, charming someone into booking a follow-up appointment. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Lily. "Forgot my lunch. Can you bring it?" He smiled and grabbed his keys. On the way out, Clara caught his arm. "Where are you going?" "Lily forgot her lunch. I'll be back in 20. Tell her I said hi." "I will." Clara kissed him, quick and casual, and Ethan walked out into the cold, his breath fogging in the air. He drove to the school, dropped off the lunch, and on the way back, he took the long route. Past the cafe where he and Clara used to meet. Past the Whitmore house, now sold to a young couple with a baby. Past the old garage where he'd spent so many years just scraping by. Everything had changed, but in the best way possible. When he got back, Clara was waiting. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, everything's good." "You sure?" "Yeah." He pulled her close. "Everything's perfect." And he meant it. The years that followed weren't easy. There were fights, there were setbacks. There were days when Ethan wondered if they'd bitten off more than they could chew. But they kept going, kept building, kept choosing each other. Lily graduated high school at the top of her class. Clara expanded the garage again, opening a second location in Riverside. Ethan learned to let go of control, to trust that the people around him wouldn't let him fall. And through it all, they stayed. Together. A family that had been built not by accident or convenience, but by choice, by love, by the simple, stubborn refusal to give up on each other. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ethan and Clara went back to the lake. It was summer, the water calm and clear. They sat under the same tree where they'd had that first real conversation, where Clara had asked if he ever thought about getting married. "Can you believe it's been 5 years?" Clara asked. "Feels like 5 minutes." "Liar. Feels like forever, in a good way." "Yeah, in a good way." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the boats drift across the water. Ethan thought about everything that had brought them here. The storm, the broken-down car, the name on a repair order that should have stayed buried. All of it had led to this moment, to this life, to this person sitting beside him. "I'm glad you came back," he said. "I'm glad you let me stay." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her. They stayed like that until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. This was it. This was the life they'd built. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and lasting, and worth every risk they'd taken to get here. When they finally stood to leave, Clara took his hand, lacing their fingers together. They walked back to the truck, and as Ethan started the engine, he looked over at her. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Clara smiled. "Yeah, let's go home." And they did. Together, just like they always would. The conversation on the porch became a turning point neither of them could have predicted. After that night, something shifted, not dramatically, but in the way foundations settle into place. They stopped waiting for permission to be happy and just started living. Winter came early that year, arriving with heavy snow that turned the world white and quiet. The garage stayed busy. Everyone needed winterizing, new tires, batteries that could handle the cold. Ethan worked longer hours, but Clara was right there beside him, and somehow it didn't feel like work anymore. It felt like building something that would last. One Saturday morning in early December, Lily appeared in the garage doorway, bundled in her winter coat, cheeks red from the cold. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked. Ethan looked up from the transmission he was rebuilding. Sure, what's up? Alone? He glanced at Clara, who raised an eyebrow but kept working. Ethan wiped his hands and followed Lily outside. The cold hit him immediately. This better be important, he said. It's freezing out here. It is. Lily took a breath, her words forming clouds in the air. I've been thinking about something, and I wanted to ask you first before I brought it up with Clara. Okay? I'm listening. I know you guys aren't married, and I know Clara's not technically my stepmom or whatever, but she feels like family, like real family. And I was wondering if maybe we could make it official somehow. Ethan's chest tightened. What do you mean by official? I don't know exactly, but she does all the mom stuff. Helps with homework, makes dinner, remembers when I have tests. She even signed my permission slip last week because you forgot. Lily shrugged, looking uncomfortable. I just thought maybe there's a way to make it so she's not just Dad's girlfriend. You know? Ethan stared at his daughter, who was growing up faster than he could keep up with, and felt something break open inside him. Have you talked to Clara about this? He asked quietly. No, I wanted to ask you first. Make sure you were okay with it. Lily, if Clara wants to be more involved in your life, I'm not going to stop her. But this is something you two need to talk about together. So you're okay with it? More than okay. Lily smiled, genuine, relieved, and threw her arms around him. Thanks, Dad. For what? For not being weird about it. I'm always weird about things. Yeah, but not about this. So thanks. She pulled back and headed inside, leaving Ethan standing in the snow, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. That evening, after dinner, Lily cornered Clara in the living room. Ethan pretended to read the newspaper in the kitchen, but he was absolutely eavesdropping. Can I ask you something? Lily said. Of course. Do you think of me as family? Clara didn't hesitate. Yes, absolutely. Good, because I think of you that way too. Lily paused. I know you're not my mom. I'm not trying to replace her or pretend she didn't exist, but you're important to me, really important, and I wanted you to know that. There was a long silence, and when Ethan finally glanced over, Clara was wiping her eyes. That means everything to me, Lily, Clara said, her voice thick. More than you know. Cool, just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. Lily got up and headed to her room like she hadn't just said something that changed everything. Ethan walked into the living room and sat down beside Clara, who was still crying quietly. You okay? He asked. Yeah, that kid. Clara laughed through her tears. She's something else. She gets it from her mother. She gets it from you too. Ethan pulled her close, and they sat like that for a long time, not saying anything, just holding on to each other. The next week, Clara came home with a folder full of papers. She set them on the kitchen table in front of Ethan, her hands shaking slightly. What's this? He asked. Legal stuff about step-parent adoption, or guardianship. I've been researching it. Ethan opened the folder, scanning the documents. His heart started pounding. Clara, I know we're not married. I know it's complicated. But there are ways to make it legal. To give me actual rights as Lily's guardian. Not to replace Sarah, never that. But to make official what's already true. She took a shaky breath. I want to be her stepmom, Ethan. Really, legally, if you'll let me. Ethan looked at her, this woman who'd walked back into his life on a stormy night and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. Yes, he said. Yes. Yeah, let's do it. Clara's face crumpled, and she threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. Ethan held her tight, feeling like every piece of his broken life had finally clicked into place. They told Lily that night. She cried, actually cried, which she never did, and then immediately tried to play it off like she had allergies. Clara hugged her so tight Lily had to tell her she couldn't breathe, and Ethan watched the two most important people in his world hold on to each other, and he felt complete. The paperwork took months, lawyers, court dates, background checks, interviews. It was exhausting and invasive and sometimes humiliating, but they pushed through it together, and by early spring, everything was finalized. Clara was officially Lily's legal guardian. They didn't have a party, just the three of them at the courthouse, signing papers and taking a terrible photo that Lily insisted on posting online with the caption, "Got a stepmom today. She's all right, I guess." Clara laughed until she couldn't breathe. That night, they went to the diner on Main Street and ordered way too much food. They talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. And when they got home, Ethan stood in the doorway, watching Clara and Lily argue about what movie to watch. And he thought about how far they'd all come. But life wasn't finished testing them yet. In late April, the garage hit trouble. Their primary parts supplier went bankrupt overnight, leaving them scrambling. One of their biggest commercial clients pulled their contract, citing budget cuts. And Danny gave his 2 weeks' notice. He'd gotten an offer in the city that paid almost double. Ethan tried not to panic, but the numbers didn't lie. They were bleeding money. "We'll figure it out," Clara said one night, staring at spreadsheets. "We're down 20% this month." "I know, but it's temporary." "You don't know that." Clara looked up at him, and her expression was harder than he expected. "Yes, I do. Because we've built something real, Ethan. Something that can survive a bad month. We're not going under because one supplier folded and one client left. We're going to adapt and keep going." "What if we can't? Then we'll figure that out too, together." Ethan wanted to believe her, but fear had a way of drowning out everything else. They cut expenses everywhere they could. Ethan took on more hours, working late into the night. Clara renegotiated contracts with every vendor she could reach, and somehow convinced 2 new commercial clients to take a chance on them. It was brutal, grinding work, and there were nights when Ethan collapsed into bed wondering if they'd made a terrible mistake. But slowly, painfully slowly, things stabilized. By June, they were back to breaking even. By July, they were profitable again. Not thriving, but surviving, and that was enough. One evening, in late summer, Ethan found Clara sitting on the back porch, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her and handed her a beer. "Rough day?" he asked. "Not really, just thinking." "About?" "About how different my life is now. A year ago, I was living in an apartment in Chicago, hating my job, barely speaking to anyone. And now I'm here, running a business with you, raising Lily, living a life I actually want to live." "You miss Chicago?" "Not even a little." She looked at him. "Do you ever regret letting me back in?" "No, but I'm scared sometimes." "Of what?" "Of losing this. Of waking up one day and realizing it was all too good to be true." Clara took his hand. "That's not going to happen, Ethan. We're going to fight. We're going to have bad days and bad months and moments when we want to kill each other, but we're not going anywhere. None of us. Promise?" "I promise." They sat there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and Ethan let himself believe her. In September, Lily started high school. She was nervous, though she tried to hide it. On the first day, Ethan drove her, and when they pulled up to the building, she didn't get out. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just, what if I don't fit in?" "Then you'll figure it out. You always do." "What if I mess up?" "Then you'll learn from it and do better next time." Lily looked at him. "You're terrible at pep talks." "I know." She smiled, and Ethan felt his chest tighten. She was so much like Sarah, so much like him, so perfectly herself. "You've got this, Lil." "Yeah, I do." She grabbed her backpack and walked toward the school, her head high, and Ethan sat there watching until she disappeared inside. Then he drove to the garage with a lump in his throat. Clara noticed immediately. "How'd drop-off go?" "She's fine. I'm a mess." "She's growing up. Too fast." "That's what they do." Clara kissed his cheek. "You're a good dad." "I'm trying." "That's all anyone can do." That fall, Clara brought up marriage again. They were lying in bed one night, both exhausted, and she said it out of nowhere. "Do you ever think about getting married?" Ethan rolled over to face her. "We've talked about this before." "I know, but that was months ago. Things are different now." "How?" "We're more settled. The business is stable, Lily's good, everything's good." She paused. "So I'm asking again, do you want to marry me?" Ethan's heart was pounding. "Are you proposing?" "Maybe. Would you say yes?" "I don't know." "Are you actually asking?" Clara laughed. "You're impossible. You brought it up." "Because I want to know where your head is." Ethan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I don't need a piece of paper to tell me we're committed. But if you want it, if it's important to you, then yeah, I'll marry you." "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "It wasn't a proposal. You're the one asking." "Fine. Ethan Hayes, will you marry me? He smiled in the dark. Yeah, I will. Clara kissed him, and they stayed tangled together for a long time, not talking, just being. They didn't tell anyone right away. It felt private, something that belonged just to them. But eventually, Lily figured it out. Are you guys getting married? She asked one morning over breakfast. Ethan and Clara exchanged a glance. How'd you know? Clara asked. Because you've been acting weird, like you have a secret. We do, Ethan said. We're getting married. Lily grinned. Finally. You're not surprised? Not even a little. You guys are disgustingly in love. It was only a matter of time. We're not disgusting. You totally are, but in a good way. Clara laughed, and Ethan shook his head. But he was smiling too. They got married in October, on a Saturday afternoon at the courthouse. Just the three of them, and Danny, who served as witness. No fancy dress, no big ceremony, just vows and rings and a kiss that felt like a promise they'd already been keeping for years. Afterward, they went to the diner and ordered too much food, just like they always did. Lily declared it the best wedding ever, and Clara laughed so hard she cried, and Ethan realized he'd never been happier in his entire life. Winter came again, and with it, a rhythm that felt sustainable. The garage was thriving. Lily was doing well in school. Ethan and Clara had settled into a life that was messy and imperfect, but undeniably theirs. One night in late December, they were lying in bed, the house quiet around them. Clara was half asleep, her head on Ethan's chest, and he was staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. You awake? He asked. Barely. I love you, Clara smiled against his chest. I love you too. I'm glad you came back. Me too. I'm glad you stayed. Where else would I go? I don't know, but I'm glad you're here. Clara lifted her head, looking at him in the dim light. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. Ever. I know. Good. She kissed him, then settled back down, her breathing evening out as she drifted off. Ethan stayed awake a little longer, his hand resting on her back, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breath. This was his life now, Clara, Lily, the garage, a family that had been broken and rebuilt into something stronger. It wasn't perfect. It was hard sometimes. But it was real. And it was his. The snow started falling outside, soft and quiet, covering the world in white. Ethan closed his eyes and let himself fall asleep, knowing that when he woke up, Clara would still be there. Lily would still be down the hall. And life would keep moving forward. Years passed, and they kept choosing each other. Through fights and setbacks, through bad months and good ones, through all the chaos that came with building a life together. Lily graduated high school at the top of her class and left for college. And Ethan cried like a baby, even though he'd sworn he wouldn't. Clara expanded the business, opening a second location. Ethan learned to let go of control, to trust the people around him. And through it all, they stayed. Together. A family built not by accident, but by choice. By love. By the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. On their 5th anniversary, they went back to the lake where they'd had their first real conversation about the future. It was summer, the water calm and blue. They sat under the same tree, sharing a picnic and watching boats drift across the water. 5 years, Clara said. Can you believe it? Feels like 5 minutes. Liar. Feels like forever. In a good way. Yeah, in a good way. They sat in comfortable silence, and Ethan thought about the storm that had brought Clara back into his life. The broken-down car. The name on a repair order that should have stayed buried. All of it had led here, to this moment, to this person beside him. I'm glad you came back, he said. I'm glad you let me stay. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her. They stayed like that until the sun started setting, painting the sky in gold and amber. This was the life they'd built. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and lasting, and worth every risk they'd taken to get here. When they finally stood to leave, Clara took his hand, lacing their fingers together. They walked back to the truck, and as Ethan started the engine, he looked over at her. Ready to go home? He asked. Clara smiled. Yeah, let's go home. And they did. Together. Just like they always would.